Welcome to Unravel Tales Africa production, where every story has a voice, every legend comes alive, and every journey leaves a lasting lesson.
There are some children who enter this world surrounded by celebration, and there are others who arrive carrying a grief they never chose. This is the story of one such child, a little girl whose very first breath was followed by her mother's last. And although she knew nothing of that tragic day, the world never allowed her to forget it. Long before she learned to speak, people had already decided who she was, not because of anything she had done, but because of what had happened the day she was born. The girl they called a curse. It was a stormy night in a small village tucked deep within the green forests of southwestern Nigeria. Rain danced upon the thatched roofs. Thunder rolled across the sky. Inside a humble mud house, a young woman fought with every ounce of strength she had left to bring new life into the world. Outside, her husband, Ade, paced endlessly beneath the shelter of the veranda. His hands trembled. His prayers came in whispers. Every cry from inside the room tightened the knot in his chest. Minutes felt like hours. Then, a baby's cry pierced through the storm. Ade froze. For one beautiful moment, hope filled his heart. His child had arrived. But as he rushed toward the doorway, the village midwife stepped outside. She held a tiny baby girl wrapped carefully in white cloth. Yet there was no smile on her face. Only silence. The kind of silence that carries terrible news. Her eyes slowly met Ade. The baby survived. She paused. But your wife did not. The world seemed to stop. The rain continued to fall. Yet Ade heard nothing. His legs weakened beneath him. He dropped to his knees. Tears streamed down his face as the tiny child reached out with fingers too small to understand loss. The woman who had dreamed of holding her daughter never had the chance. One life had begun, another had ended. And in a single heartbreaking moment, a father became both a parent and a widower. The days that followed were filled with mourning. The village gathered to bury Amina's mother beneath an old Iroko tree overlooking the fields she had loved. People cried. Prayers were offered. Drums echoed softly in the distance. But not every voice carried compassion. As the mourners drifted home, whispers floated through the village like smoke. That child came with bad luck. If she hadn't been born, her mother would still be alive. No one spoke those words to the baby. They spoke them around her, as if sorrow itself needed someone to blame. Ade ignored every cruel whisper. Each evening, he cradled little Amina in his arms and whispered stories about the mother she would never know. He promised himself, no matter how difficult life became, his daughter would always be loved. But promises are easiest to make before life begins testing them. Months turned into years. The loneliness inside the house grew heavier. A crying child needed more than a grieving father could give alone. The cooking was neglected. The farm suffered. Neighbors began to talk. A little girl needs a mother. You cannot do this by yourself forever. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us create more inspiring African stories just like this. Now, let's get back to the story. At first, Ade resisted. His heart still belonged to the woman he had buried. But eventually, exhaustion overcame grief. Believing he was doing what was best for his daughter, he agreed to remarry. He had no idea that decision would shape Amina's entire childhood. The woman he married arrived with warm smiles, gentle words, and promises that sounded like answered prayers. She held little Amina in her arms and said, "From today, you are my daughter too." The villagers smiled with relief. Even Ade believed the hardest days were finally behind them. But some smiles hide storms far darker than the ones in the sky. And for little Amina, the greatest tragedy of her life had not happened the day she was born. It was only just beginning. The first few days after the wedding, everything appeared peaceful. Mama Bisi smiled whenever visitors came. She held Amina's tiny hand. She cooked warm meals. She spoke softly to her new husband. Anyone watching from the outside would have believed that the little girl had finally found the mother she never had. But kindness that exists only for an audience is never kindness at all. The moment the last visitor stopped coming, everything changed. The gentle smile disappeared. The warm voice turned cold. And the little girl who had longed for a mother's embrace found herself living with someone who saw her as a burden. As the years passed, Amina learned something no child should ever have to learn: how to become invisible. Before the first rooster crowed each morning, she was already awake. While the stars still clung to the night sky, she carried heavy clay pots to the stream. The water was cold, the path was rough, the pots were far too heavy for a child her age. Yet, she never complained. When she returned, the work had only just begun. She swept the compound until every trace of dust disappeared. She washed plates, collected firewood, fed the goats, worked in the small family farm beneath the burning afternoon sun. By the time evening arrived, her small hands were covered with blisters. Her feet ached from walking barefoot across dry earth. Still, there was always another chore waiting. Not long after the marriage, Mama Bisi gave birth to 2 children of her own. The house filled with laughter once again. But not all laughter sounded the same. Her own children were dressed in clean clothes. They played beneath the mango trees. They slept while the morning breeze remained cool. Amina walked. If food was scarce, Mama Bisi's children ate first. If there was only one blanket during the Harmattan nights, her children kept warm. Amina simply curled herself into a corner and waited for morning. Some nights, her stomach growled louder than the crickets outside. Yet, she never stole. She never argued. She never raised her voice. Because somewhere inside her young heart, she still believed that if she was good enough, someone would eventually love her. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us create more inspiring African stories just like this. Now, let's get back to the story. Her father noticed that she had grown quieter. The bright little girl who once laughed while chasing butterflies had become silent. Her smile appeared less often. The light in her eyes slowly faded. Sometimes he wanted to ask why. But before he could, Mama Bisi always had an answer waiting. She's stubborn. She refuses to listen. She pretends to be hungry even after eating. Each lie was spoken so calmly that it sounded like truth. Ade wanted peace inside his home. So instead of asking questions, he chose silence. Without realizing it, his silence became another wound in his daughter's heart. Not every child is abandoned by absence. Some are abandoned while standing in the very same room. One evening, after hours of walking in the fields, Amina quietly lifted the lid from the cooking pot. It was empty. Only a few drops of soup clung to the bottom. She looked toward the table. Her stepmother and the other children had already finished eating. Her father had gone outside to wash. She gently placed the lid back, as though making no sound would somehow hide her hunger. She walked to the clay pot in the corner, scooped a calabash full of water, drank it slowly, then lay down on her thin woven mat. The water filled her stomach, but it could never satisfy her hunger. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to stop herself from crying. Yet, something extraordinary was happening. Something no one in that household could see. Instead of allowing hardship to make her bitter, it was quietly making her compassionate. Every insult taught her kindness. Every empty stomach taught her generosity. Every lonely night taught her how deeply people need love. The pain that was meant to break her was slowly shaping the woman she would one day become. And before long, that quiet kindness would catch the attention of a complete stranger. A meeting that would change Amina's destiny forever. The old saying in many African villages goes like this: when the heart remains pure, even suffering cannot steal its light. No one knew those words better than Amina. She had every reason to become angry, every reason to hate, every reason to believe the world had been unfair to her. But somehow, her heart refused to harden. Instead of giving back the cruelty she received, she chose compassion. Not because life had been kind to her, but because she understood what it felt like to be forgotten. Every market day, Amina walked nearly an hour beside her stepmother, balancing a woven basket on her head. The village market was always alive. Women bargained over baskets of tomatoes and peppers. Children chased one another through narrow paths. The scent of roasted corn drifted through the air. Drummers filled the square with lively rhythms. It was the happiest place in the village. Yet, even there, Amina remained almost invisible. While others laughed and traded stories, she quietly carried loads, arranged vegetables, and obeyed every command. Still, she never stopped smiling. Not because she had no pain, but because she refused to let pain become her identity. On one unforgettable afternoon, as the market reached its busiest hour, an elderly traveler stepped from a vehicle parked near the entrance. His clothes were simple, yet carefully made. His walking stick was polished. His eyes carried the calm confidence of a man who had lived a long and meaningful life. As he made his way through the crowded marketplace, someone accidentally bumped into him. The woven basket in his hand slipped. Bright oranges rolled across the dusty ground. Some were stepped on. Others disappeared beneath busy feet. People looked, then kept walking. Everyone seemed too busy to notice, or perhaps too busy to care. Without thinking, Amina dropped the basket she was carrying. She hurried towards the old man. One by one, she picked up every orange. She gently wiped the dust away with the edge of her wrapper before placing each fruit back into the basket. When she finished, she smiled softly and bowed her head. "I'm sorry they fell, Grandpa." The old man looked at her for a long moment. His eyes searched her face, not with curiosity, but with admiration. "My child," he said quietly, "everyone else walked past me. Why did you stop?" Amina lowered her eyes. "My mother died before I could know her." She paused. "But I like to believe that helping people is the kind of daughter she would have wanted me to become." For several seconds, the old man said nothing. Amina. A beautiful name. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket. Not for money, but for a small folded piece of paper. He carefully wrote something on it, then placed it inside his pocket once more. He looked back at Amina one last time. "Our paths will cross again." And with that, he disappeared into the crowd. Amina thought little of the encounter. To her, it had simply been another opportunity to help someone in need. She never imagined that the stranger was one of the wealthiest agricultural entrepreneurs in the region. A man who believed that a person's character was worth far more than their possessions. Nor did she know that he had quietly asked several traders about the young girl who had helped him. Every answer sounded the same. "She is the hardest working child in this village. She never complains. She helps everyone. She has suffered greatly, but she has never allowed suffering to make her cruel. The old man's heart was moved because he had spent his entire life searching for one thing that money could never buy: character. And he had just found it in the least expected place. Back in Amina's home, life grew even more difficult. The rains failed. The once green fields turned dry and cracked. Harvest after harvest was lost. The family's savings disappeared. Goats were sold. Tools were sold. Even the small pieces of jewelry Mama Bisi treasured were exchanged for bags of grain. Hunger no longer belonged only to Amina. Now, it sat at everyone's table. For the first time, Mama Bisi discovered that poverty does not choose favorites. The suffering she had reserved for one child had quietly entered the lives of them all. But just as darkness seemed ready to swallow every hope they had left, a cloud of dust appeared on the village road. A vehicle unlike anything the villagers had ever seen was slowly making its way toward Ade's house. And inside that vehicle sat the elderly stranger from the market. He had come back looking for only one person: Amina. There is an old African proverb that says, when the Creator decides to lift a person, no human hand can keep them on the ground. Amina was about to discover the truth behind those words. The black vehicle rolled slowly into the dusty compound, drawing curious eyes from every corner of the village.
The village trembled. Children abandoned their games and ran behind it. Women stepped out of their homes, wiping their hands on their wrappers. Old men rose from the wooden benches beneath the iroko tree. Nobody in the village had ever seen such a luxurious vehicle stop at Ade's humble house. The engine fell silent. For a brief moment, so did the entire village. Then, the door opened. Out stepped the elderly man from the marketplace. His walking stick touched the earth with calm confidence as he looked around the compound. His eyes were searching for only one face. And when they found it, he smiled. Amina froze. She recognized him immediately. The old man walked toward her with gentle steps. "My child," he said softly, "I told you our paths would cross again." She lowered her head respectfully. "I remember, Grandpa." He looked around the compound. Then his eyes settled on Ade. "You must be her father." Ade nodded cautiously.
I am. My name is Chief Balogun. I own farms, schools, and agricultural training centers across the country. The villagers exchanged surprised glances. Some whispered his name in disbelief. They had heard stories about him. A man respected not only for his wealth, but for his generosity. Chief Balogun turned back to Ade. "I came because of your daughter." Mama Bisi folded her arms tightly across her chest. For years, no visitor had ever come asking for Amina. She could not imagine why anyone would do so now. Chief Balogun continued. "Several weeks ago, your daughter helped me in the marketplace. I watched everyone ignore an old man in need. But she stopped. She expected nothing in return. He paused. I have spent many years searching for young people with good character.
Knowledge can be taught. Wealth can be earned. But integrity is a treasure. He smiled warmly at Amina. And your daughter possesses it. The compound fell into complete silence. I want to pay for her education. I will cover every expense. Her school fees, her books, her accommodation, everything. A gasp swept through the crowd. Ade stared at the elderly man, unable to speak. His lips trembled, his eyes filled with tears. For years, he had worried about how he would provide for his family. Now, someone was offering his daughter a future beyond anything he had ever imagined. But not everyone shared his joy. Mama Bisi's face tightened. Her voice carried the bitterness she had hidden for so long. Why her? She asked without shame.
There are many children in this village. What makes her so special? The chief looked at her kindly. Then he answered with quiet wisdom. Because when everyone else walked away, she walked towards someone in need. A heart like that deserves every opportunity. No one said another word. Even the wind seemed to stand still. Then came the words no one expected. That evening, after the visitors had gone, Ade sat quietly outside his home. The stars shimmered above him. Amina sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, Ade broke the silence. My daughter. His voice was heavy with regret. I have not always protected you the way I should have. Amina looked at him gently. She saw the guilt in his eyes, the years of silence, the mistakes he wished he could erase. She reached for his rough, weathered hand, without anger, without blame. I know you tried, Daddy. Those simple words pierced his heart more deeply than any accusation ever could. For the first time in many years, he wept openly. Not because he was weak, but because love has a way of exposing the burdens we hide from everyone else. A few days later, the time came for Amina to leave. She owned very little. A small cloth bag, 2 neatly folded dresses, a worn Bible given to her by an elderly neighbor.
They remembered every cruel word they had spoken about the little girl they once called cursed. Now, she was living with possibilities they had never imagined. As the vehicle began to move,
Amina looked through the window one last time. She saw the mud house growing smaller, the dusty road fading behind her, the village where she had known so much pain slowly disappeared into the distance. She did not know exactly where life was taking her. There is something remarkable about seasons. No matter how long the night lasts, morning always finds its way back. For Amina, the season of surviving had finally come to an end. Now, she had entered the season of becoming. Life in the city was unlike anything she had ever imagined. The buildings stretched high into the sky. The roads never seemed to sleep. People hurried from one place to another, each carrying dreams of their own. At first, everything felt overwhelming. She had grown up in a quiet village where everyone knew one another. She learned. Every opportunity she received felt like a gift she could never afford to waste. Years passed. The frightened little girl who once carried water before sunrise slowly became a confident young woman whose knowledge began changing lives. She specialized in modern agriculture, determined to help farmers produce more from the land they loved. The same soil that had once failed her family would one day become the foundation of her success. Under Chief Balogun's mentorship, Amina founded an agricultural enterprise that trained struggling farmers, introduced improved farming methods, and created opportunities for rural communities. What began as a small initiative soon spread from one village to another and another. Fields that had once been dry turned green again. Harvests became plentiful. Families who had lived with constant hunger found hope once more. Before long, people across the country began speaking about the young woman whose work was transforming communities. Awards came, recognition followed, yet success never changed the way she greeted people. She still smiled first. She still listened more than she spoke. She still remembered what it felt like to have nothing. Because true greatness never forgets where it came from.
Back in the village, life had taken a different path. The drought had left deep scars. Ade's health began to fail. Years of hard labor had weakened his body. The family farm produced almost nothing. Debt continued to grow. The roof leaked whenever it rained. There were days when even Mama Bisi struggled to feed her own children. For the first time in her life, she understood the weight of helplessness. Many nights she lay awake, remembering the little girl she had denied food, the child she had forced to walk, the tears she had ignored. Regret became a burden she carried everywhere. She often wondered, where was Amina now? Had she found happiness? Would she ever return?
One bright afternoon, the familiar sound of engines echoed along the dusty village road. Children ran towards the entrance of the village. Villagers stepped outside, shielding their eyes from the sun. Several elegant vehicles rolled slowly through the narrow streets. They stopped right in front of Ade's old house. The doors opened.
A graceful young woman stepped out, dressed in a beautifully tailored emerald green African gown. Confidence rested gently upon her shoulders, but humility still shone in her eyes. For a moment, no one recognized her. Then an elderly neighbor whispered, "It's Amina." The entire village fell silent. The child they had once called cursed had returned as a woman of honor. Ade struggled to his feet. His hands trembled. His eyes searched her face as though afraid she might disappear. "My daughter," he whispered. Before he could say any other word, Amina embraced him. Not as a wealthy woman greeting a poor father, but as a daughter who had never stopped longing for his embrace. Tears flowed freely.
Years of distance melted away in a single moment. Then Mama Bisi slowly stepped forward. Her head was bowed. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I have carried this guilt for many years. She could no longer hold back her tears. I treated you as though you didn't belong. I made your childhood a place of pain. I cannot change what I did. She looked into Amina's eyes. But if there is even the smallest place for forgiveness in your heart, I ask for it. The villagers held their breath. Many expected Amina to walk away. After everything she had endured, no one would have blamed her. Instead, she stepped closer. She gently lifted the older woman to her feet. Then she wrapped her arms around her. I forgive you long before today. Because if I had carried hatred with me, I would never have become the woman I was meant to be. Mama Bisi broke down completely. For the first time, the embrace was real. In the weeks that followed, Amina quietly began restoring everything poverty had taken away. She paid every debt her father owed. She ensured he received proper medical care. She rebuilt the family home. She established a farming cooperative that created jobs for villagers. She funded scholarships for children whose families could not afford school. She drilled a clean water borehole so women no longer walked miles to fetch water. The village that had once whispered words of condemnation now echoed with songs of gratitude. Not because Amina had become wealthy, but because she had chosen compassion over revenge. Years later, travelers passing through the village would often ask about the flourishing farms and the thriving community. The elders would smile. Then they would point toward a large mango tree standing proudly at the center of the village. Beneath that tree, children gathered every evening to hear the story of a little girl who lost her mother on the day she was born, who was rejected in the home where she should have been loved, who answered cruelty with kindness, and who returned not with anger, but with grace. Because the greatest victory is not proving your enemies wrong. It is refusing to become like them. And perhaps that is life's quietest miracle. The child they once called a curse had become the greatest blessing they had ever known. A child placed in your care is not a burden, but a blessing. Love them, guide them, and treat them with the same kindness you would give your own children. Never show favoritism or make them feel less because they are not yours by birth. Tomorrow is unknown, and the child you nurture today may become the very blessing that changes your life. Compassion leaves a legacy that blood alone cannot.